Cover two.
Welcome everybody to the Cover 2 Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm here with my man Human. How's it going today, Human?
Hey, Will, doing great. We had a little bit of a break there. I think we're going to start transitioning to an episode bi-weekly. Here in just the dead part of the off season where things are slowing down a bit. But I'm glad to be here, and we're going to be talking about some new rankings here today.
Well, yes, we are. And, just like always, make sure to like and subscribe. Hit us up at YouTube, Google Play, Apple iTunes, or I should say Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
And Will, before we move any further, we do have a little bit of news that broke earlier. I believe it was yesterday or earlier this morning with Julio Jones. We have his destination going to the Tennessee Titans for, I believe it was a second-round pick this year and a fourth-round pick next year, and in exchange for a sixth-round pick coming with Julio to the Titans. So that definitely changed some of my rankings today. And then also it's going to change some of the rankings that we do on our next episode where we talk about wide receivers and running backs. But a pretty big move. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's going to be, I think, a big thing for me when it comes to our next show when we talk about some pass catchers and some running backs. But, it might help my man Kyle Pitts, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll see some of some of that effect today in our rankings.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about quarterbacks and tight ends, just from the ADP concerns and what we like going into this year's draft. And like Human said, things are going to change from week to week, maybe probably more month to month. So we'll have to do another one of these just to get you ready for the draft. But just early set, what we're doing right now is we're going to talk about the quarterbacks and the tight ends. So Human, who is one of your top 12 top 12 quarterbacks for this season right now?
We are talking about QB1s here. So if we're talking about standard 12-team leagues, you're talking about your top 12 players in a position are your QB1s, tight end ones, running back ones. They're your number one ranked or your first starters, if you want to quote unquote put starters there. And the guy I have at number 12 is probably my most controversial one. And it's really dependent on if he's actually the quarterback or not. If he's the quarterback, then you got the green light to start him, and I think he'll have that great upside of a QB1, right on the fringe here of a QB1 at the 12th spot, and that's Taysom Hill. You know how I feel about the quarterbacks that give you the nice floor with the running game, and that's definitely going to be Taysom Hill, especially with goal line work. We saw a nice sample size of what his fantasy value will look like if he is the guy in New Orleans, and if we get a whole season of that, he's someone right now. His ADP is 20.04. So that's the 20th round, fourth pick. If a draft even goes that deep. So that's giving you massive upside to where if you take that shot on him, you can draft him towards the end of your draft and you're not investing any draft capital in him and he's giving you that return back. That's why I like him as a QB1 here at 12.
I have 25 QBs on my list. And literally, Taysom Hill's not there.
But that's maybe you're not equating him to be a full-blown starter. And that's why I preface this by saying if he is the starter in New Orleans, he will, in my opinion, he has that upside to be in the QB1 conversation.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'll give it to you there. Not what I was thinking, but, I'm going to go with my number 12. And this one, we don't know 100% on if he's playing or not this season. But it looks like after the reports keep coming out more and more that I think he will be, and I think he's a great steal, like you said at the very end of the draft, and that's Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson is going to be playing this season. I think that he is, if he does have an amazing, or if he does get to start, he is in the top 5, top 10 quarterback in this league every single year. They did get hurt, obviously, with less wide receivers, and it's kind of a little bare in there a little bit, but I'm really trusting in Deshaun if he is playing.
Yeah, and that's the one I'm kind of crinkling my eyebrows at over because even through my process of statting out teams and ranking players, I didn't even touch Deshaun Watson yet. I don't think he's going to play this year. I just don't see it happening. I think Houston's making preparations to kind of move on this season without him. Even if he does, I don't know, man. It's a tough one for me. If things do clear up eventually and he does get a green light to play, then yeah, we'll put him in the conversation. That's another, I guess, an asterisk type of player for you right there, the 12 spot.
So you're going to take it at number 11.
11 is my guy, and he's moved down a little bit because I did have him ranked a little bit higher when we did our initial talk about quarterbacks. And I kind of just wanted to get him in there so I could talk about him. But realistically, I've got him at the 11th spot as a QB1. That's Jalen Hurts. Currently, right now, he's got a ADP in that ballpark of a 10th round, 12th pick, 10.12. He's another one of those guys that is going to have the high floor. He was a big winner in the draft because they didn't take a quarterback. They haven't brought in any quarterbacks. They did get him some weapons. He's going to have that ability to be kind of like that. I'm not going to say the Kyler Murray or the Lamar Jackson the last couple of years where they had that huge breakout because of that running game. But I think he's going to be able to lean. You're going to be able to lean on him and draft him later to where you're maximizing getting those very important fantasy positions at running back, wide receiver, tight end throughout those first nine rounds, maybe even 8 rounds, depending on where he goes in your draft and who's spotting him. But I've got him ranked at the 11th as the 11th quarterback here.
Interesting. I thought you'd have him a little higher with your draft and the way that you're big on him, but I guess that's because you're trying to steal him later on, so you're trying to get everybody not to think that you're going to take him.
Maybe I'm sandbagging it here.
That's right. So for me, it's kind of funny that I'm in the same position. I'm going Joe Burrow here. He's actually
you mean your number one guy?
My number one. That's right. I mean, he is going 8.01 pick right now. And so he is going a lot higher than you see. I think that he is a great player. I think with Jamar Chase there now, he's got somebody that he has great chemistry with. 2 strong wide receivers. It's still, I know I did draft an offensive lineman, but I still think that he's going to be running for his life. And that division is very tough. So that's why I have him ranked down at 11.
Okay. What about 10? What do you have at 10 spot?
For me, I've got Dak. Dak is back, and I think that he's going to, make this offense a lot more secure this season. And I really like Dak with the running game that he does have. Of course, Zeke had a terrible year last year, but I think he's going to have a resurgence. And then for him and CeeDee Lamb and Cooper and all those guys, they're going to have. I think he's going to have a great year.
Yeah, I've got him a little bit higher, and we'll get to that when we get there. At 10, I've got Ryan Tannehill. He actually moved up ahead of Jalen Hurts for me with the news of Julio Jones going there. Ryan Tannehill had a pretty strong season. He's had a pretty consistent couple seasons in a row now, and adding an extra weapon, I think that's going to allow Tennessee to maybe lean on him a little bit more and not lean so much or not have to feel like they have to lean so much on Derrick Henry and maybe open it up a little bit more with Tannehill, where he's also got a pretty decent floor as far as his ability to escape the pocket, get a first down, run for a touchdown on a bootleg. And I think Tannehill is going to have a pretty strong year this year, and I've got him up there at the number 10 position.
Well, and that's interesting because, as you said, I took a lot of this information that I was getting from Sleeper, and, just last night, he moved from being like 11th round, 11.1, 11.3, all the way to the 6th round, just because of that trade. So, he's averaging in a 9.06. So I agree with you. He has got that upside now, going into this season. I have him actually outside number 13 for me, just because I think they're just going to run the ball so much. But it's a possibility. You got number 9.
At 9, this is where I've got I think this is the top of my 4th tier of quarterbacks going upwards here. And if you're not drafting based on tiers, if you're not making rankings based on tiers, you're kind of doing it wrong. I don't know if we've talked about that yet on this show, but that's how I base my drafts on, is breaking my positions into tiers. Would I be happy with a player from this tier versus that tier? So on and so forth. And that's something we can get into when we get into more mock drafting. But this is the top of my bottom tier here of the top 12 of the QB1s, and that's Justin Herbert. He's currently got an ADP of 5.11, so back end of the 5th round. And I've got him as the 9th QB. I would not be taking a quarterback in the 5th round that isn't one of those tier 1, tier 2 kind of guys, tier 3 guys. He had the greatest, not one of, he had the greatest rookie campaign as a passer in NFL history. 31 passing touchdowns. I could see him making that move to 36 touchdowns or so this year. I think he kind of set the bar for himself, and I don't see any regression happening there. I think we're gonna see him continue that progression, put up those stats, put up those numbers, and not look back.
And I agree with you actually that he's at my number 9 as well. He is. I think that he's going to have a regression in touchdowns that he runs in his running touchdowns, because I don't see him as that kind of Dak kind of touchdown production of 6 or more every single season. But he does have an extra game, and I do think he's going to have a good year. And I think Mike Williams is going to have a breakout season that's going to really help him. Just get those extra touchdowns and extra red zone chances.
I wasn't sure if we would have one that we would have in common here at the bottom end of the QB1, so I'm pretty surprised by that. So who do you have at the 8th spot?
I'm going with Matthew Stafford. New offense, new system, but he's been there for a long time now. He's actually been able, because he got traded so early, he's been able to get accustomed to the team and the system. And the only reason he's ranked this low for me, because I think that the Rams have one of the best offenses as far as skill positions, is because of the new team. But he could be a top 5 quarterback in this upcoming season.
That's where I have a big difference of opinion there, where you said you had him pretty low. I've got him outside the top 12. And for the exact reason that you said, he's on a much better offense. And a better team, in fact. He's not going to have to be playing from behind. He's not going to be having to play catch up and having those late 4th quarter where they're just chucking it downfield every drive. I don't think he's going to put up the intensive amount of stats as he did when he was in Detroit, having to play from behind, having to be in situations where he's playing 2-minute offense, most of the second half. So I think that's where we'll see a little bit of a difference of opinion there, where I don't think Stafford's going to fall into that top 12. Over at number 8, I've got Russell Wilson. And this is maybe one of my biggest discrepancies based on ADP, because Russ has an ADP of 4.07, which I get. I mean, he had a fantastic first quarter of the season, first half of the season last year, but he's done this 2 years in a row now where he's had kind of like an inconsistent 2 different stories with the season, where he had a strong start, weak start, strong finish. That inconsistency for me is going to make me veer away from him a little bit, where I would not touch him in those first 5 rounds. Absolutely not. He's at the bottom of my tier 3 here at the number 8 position.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about him later in my rankings, but I'm going to go with my number 7 in this ADP with Lamar Jackson. And I think that a lot of people would be surprised about that, because Lamar Jackson, of course, has a high ADP of the 3rd round, possibly average of around the 5th round. But he is a top-tier quarterback most years. Obviously, he had a struggle last year. And I think that they figured him out in Baltimore a little bit. And it's really about what they're going to do offensively. They got a new receiver, yes. I just don't trust him. And he does have the legs to make it happen in this league, but I'm not feeling Baltimore this season.
Yeah, I've got him higher up. I've got him much higher up. His ADP has dropped a little bit this year, but I think the value is still there with his legs, and I think they did surround him with not the necessary weapons, but I think they gave him enough to kind of help push him along in his progression. We'll get to that when we do. But at the number 7 spot, I've got Dak Prescott here. He does have a pretty high ADP here. I've got him marked as an ADP of 5.07. But I've got him here in the 7th. In the first month of the season last year, he was on pace to throw for over 6,700 yards. He was in the running to be an MVP candidate. All they've done is add weapons to that offense. From all the reports, Dak is looking to come back healthy. And even with the devastating injury he had, I am very happy putting him as the number 7 QB.
Well, that's good. I mean, I do think that Dak's going to be the hardest to predict this year just because of everything that happened, that new group of guys he's got. But no, I agree. He is, I think he's going to be, he's definitely a top 10, that's for sure. Well, now we're going to break it down into just the top six, and we want to show you all of them together. So, Hooman, who you got at six?
I've got here, and this might be a little bit surprising to some of the listeners here. I've got Aaron Rodgers here. And I know there's a lot of, question around him. And this is just under the assumption that he is in Green Bay. Even if he is in Green Bay, I still have him a little bit lower. I just, I don't think he's going to, and I've talked about this before, where he's going to have that regression in the passing touchdowns. He threw 48 passing TDs. I don't think there's no room for improvement there. He's not going to top that. I think it's only going to go down. They didn't really do a whole lot as far as offensively to help him again. They did not bring in another complement to Devontae Adams, so they're kind of going with the receivers they have there, and I think that's what's causing a lot of the issues with Rodgers and his uncertainty. But if he is playing this year, I've got him as the QB6.
Well, I am in agreement with you. We're back agreeing again. I just he's just so talented. There's no way you can't put him in the top five or just outside of it here. I agree. I think he's going to play this season. I think he's going to play for the Packers. And him and Devontae Adams have a great relationship as far as on the field and chemistry. That I just think that maybe he doesn't get the 46. I mean, granted, there is an extra game. But he's still going to get you at least 40 touchdowns, I think, at each and every season. And he's consistently not throwing a lot of picks. So he's a great fantasy player for you.
Yeah, and here's the weird thing. Funny enough, if he does end up in, let's say, Denver, I think I would maybe give him a bump of a spot because I think they would be more reliant on him in the passing game than they would be in Green Bay.
Yeah, interesting. I think I understand what you're saying there because of the wide receivers. Judy's really good, but
Judy, Sutton, they got great receiver. They have a great receiving core there. Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton. They don't have as strong of a running game as the Packers do, so that's where I think that Rodgers could get that bump if he does get traded.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to go with number 5, and I'm going to go with Tom Brady.
Wow, I thought I was going to have a surprising, shocking pick with Tampa Tom here at number 5, and we matched on this one again.
Well, there you go. Well, I mean, listen, as you probably note, they had the best offense from week 13 on. They didn't lose anybody. They have the same guys coming back. Why isn't he in the top 5? I just don't understand why he wouldn't be.
Yeah, and I mean, he led the league in air yards of 20-plus yard completions. His TD rate was exceptional. That offense got clicking, and I think it's gonna keep going. I don't see them letting up with that, and I think they found the rhythm, and I think we'll get at least one more season of Tom Brady there.
What do you have at number 4 there?
So number 4, this is where I'm moving into my second tier. So tier 3 ended there with Tom Brady, had Russell Wilson at the back end, Tom Brady at the top end of it, and here at the bottom of tier 2 is where I'm kind of moving in, and this is where I'm thinking tier 2 guys. This is where I'd be willing to invest a third, fourth, fifth round pick on. And Lamar Jackson is my number 4 guy. You talked about him earlier. I still think he has that great upside with the run game. The passing game could be in flux, but I think we're going to get that consistent run game to where he is going to be worth his value in that run game alone. And then you throw onto it that he does have the option to pass it also.
Well, I'm going to go with somebody that you had at number 4, and that would be Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson is going to have a breakout season this year because I think after last season and how poorly it ended, I think he's highly motivated, and he's one of those guys that is an MVP candidate almost every single season. So I think with DJ Metcalf and Lockett, and they just got a tight end too, I believe. I can't remember what his name is. We'll talk about it later in the show. But all those guys put together, I think their offense is ready, as we say, cook, and I'm going to let Russell cook.
So where would you draft Russ yourself?
So for me, I agree with you that it's hard to draft a quarterback that early. I'm always looking at value at a quarterback in the 5th round. I don't know if I'd take Russ into the 6th or 7th round, and I don't think he'd be there. But if he was there in the sixth or seventh round, where I was able to get my my two wide receivers, my two or three running backs, and he's still there, I might take him in the sixth or seventh round.
So hypothetical, if you're sitting in the sixth or seventh round, you have a choice between Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson. Who are you going to take?
I'm taking Russell Wilson.
Okay, that was without even a hesitation. All right. So who do you have at number 3 then?
At number 3, I think we might be in pretty much agreement here. Maybe not, but I have Kyler Murray. Murray is a star. He's got the legs. He's got a lot of things that Lamar Jackson has. But I like his receiving core 10 times more. I mean, basically all I have to do is throw the ball up to DeAndre Hopkins, and he's going to go get it. So Murray's my number 3.
We do actually have a little bit of discrepancy, and I've got Josh Allen at number 3. Great season. I think he's going to put up another fantastic season. He's got that ability to run. Also, I just think with what you talked about with Kyler Murray, I think that puts Kyler for me, and I'm going to go ahead and just say it, at number 2 above Josh Allen, just because he does have a little bit more something with him than Josh Allen does. I don't know if Josh Allen's going to put up the same amount of TDs. I think Kyler Murray has room to improve his or his passing touchdowns. So that's just, splitting the hairs for me, where I moved Kyler Murray up, and Josh Allen would be the top of tier 2 for me, and Kyler Murray is the bottom of tier 1, where, okay, I'd be happy with Josh Allen or Lamar as, third round, fourth round, fifth round pick, sixth round pick. Kyler Murray at number 2. And then we obviously probably have the same number 1, Patrick Mahomes. I'd be happy with. I don't personally invest that second round pick on a quarterback, third round pick, fourth round pick. But if those players were available there, I would think about it.
So if you were going around the horn, you had the first pick, and you got your running back, and it came to your second round, 212, you would take Murray if he's there?
Absolutely not. No.
So would you take him right after on the snake back?
I wouldn't take a QB that high. That's not my draft preference. He's someone I would contemplate in the third round. If I'm sitting in the third round, I've got 2 running backs, and I'm maybe picking at 301, 302, 303, or 304. I would contemplate Kyler Murray there. And for me, that's a big deal. I would not. I mean, if Patrick Mahomes was still sitting there, I would jump on that, because that's something special right there. Kyler Murray, I would actually contemplate kind of breaking my draft strategy to take him in that upper third round.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in agreement on that. The set and forget it player, whatever position that is, it's hard to get. And if you can get it early enough, you can. But will it ruin everything else? You never know. So it's almost like you have to practice it and make sure that you feel confident about it. But you're correct when you say that I'm going Josh Allen at number 2. Everything that you said, I just think that they'll use him more in his offense as far as the run game. I think Kyler runs because he can, and I think Josh Allen, it's almost like in the system because they don't have a running game.
Right.
So that's why I have Josh there, and then of course we both have Pat Mahomes, the best QB, the best offense. He's just the best right now, and there's not many that can get close to him. Last year in the playoffs for me, and one of the leagues I was in, Aaron Rodgers got him in the playoffs as far as the amount of points, but it was like 10 points. So it was splitting hairs, but Pat Mahomes is still the best quarterback.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is the clear-cut number 1. It's not even. I don't even think that's something that we really need to talk about that much. But we got a show here, so we do talk about it a little bit. But he is the clear-cut number 1.
So as we get into this, we want to make sure that we do something different, obviously, in our draft strategy. But if you think that Pat Mahomes is going to be your guy, you can get him in the 110 or the 112. I wouldn't hate on it, but you better get that running back next. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, this is kind of leading us into our next conversation here with our next rankings. I would take Travis Kelce in the first round over taking Patrick Mahomes in the first round. That quarterback value can be had, like you said. The difference between Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers last year was really not that much, but draft-wise, there was a big difference where a lot of people got Aaron Rodgers in the 8th, 9th round last year. And that means they loaded up on skill position players. And that's I don't know. That's definitely something I'm a little bit different on. I think that's you're taking a real leap there, taking a quarterback in the first round, even in the second round.
Well, let's go into that position of tight end. We're going to go through the tight ends because, for the most part, I would say, I don't know about you, Human, but I would say from 12 to 6, maybe even 12 to 4, it's probably interchangeable. You could get lucky either way. It's really splitting hairs. We do know that there are a top 3, maybe even a top 4 this season. But who do you have at number 12?
Yeah, and maybe on this one here, I'm just going to list. How about I just list off my 12 through
That's perfect.
6? List off from 12 through 6 in order, and then you can list off your 12 through 6 in order. I don't think we need to spend that much time talking
I
about these
agree.
guys. At 12, I've got Rob Gronkowski. I think he had a very strong finish. I think he's someone you can get pretty late in drafts and get some good value out of him. There is the issue with OJ Howard coming back. At 11, I've got Noah Fant. That's obviously going to change drastically if Aaron Rodgers does somehow end up in Denver. At 10, I've got Robert Tonyan, which that's going to change drastically if Aaron Rodgers is not in Green Bay. And then at 9, I've got Tyler Higbee. He's got that association with Matthew Stafford loving the tight end position. 8, I've got Mike Gesicki. 7, I've got Dallas Goedert. And then at number 6, I've got Mark Andrews, who might be a little bit surprising to some people out there to have him ranked at the 6th position. But that's my 12 through 6 there. What about you?
That is an interesting one. I mean, like you said, I think that also tells me that I'm not taking Jackson so early because he is the number 2, possibly number 3 receiver on that team.
Yeah, but you're not taking Lamar Jackson because of what he does with Mark Andrews.
Well, I'm going to go through 12 is actually Evan Ingram. He's had a couple he had a terrible year last year. We all agree with that. I think that he's definitely not the number 1 in that offense, but now they got their number 1 back with Barkley. I think he's going to have an opportunity to be opened up, and then with Galladay and the other guys that are there, he's going to have the ability to get more space. Jonnu Smith, I think the Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry is really hard. I think Johnny's the best pass catcher, so I'm going there. I'm with you on Gronk. Gronk is my number 10, though, just because that offense is a little bit more deadly, I feel like. I've got Logan Thomas at number 9 for me. Dangerous offense that Logan Thomas is in. Then Noah Fant. And then I've got one that I think that you might think is a little interesting, and that's Blake Jerwin. I think that Blake Jerwin's ready for a breakout season. He's healthy again, and Dak is back. And then, did you say number 6, right?
I
You said
did.
your 6.
Yes, I did.
And I had Mark Andrews at 6.
Oh, okay. Wow. So we've got a couple that I thought were going to be surprising that we actually lined up pretty well on. And for the record, I do love Blake Jarwin. I think he was poised to have that breakout season last year. He was one of my guys last year, one of my sleeper tight ends. So if you can get Jarwin at some point in this draft, and if you pass on one of these upper tier guys and you want to take a shot late, I think Jarwin is a great one to get and maybe sneak in like 10th round, 11th round. So let's talk about number 5 here. And number 5 is where I've got Kyle Pitts. I know you might have him a little bit higher. His ADP currently is 5.05. I like him as the 5th round guy. I think we could even give him a little bit of a bump with the Julio Jones news. I think that more so impacts Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage than it will with Kyle Pitts. I think those targets will be there for Kyle Pitts regardless. I just like my number 4 a little bit better than Kyle Pitts for a specific reason. I'll get to that in a little bit. I'll let you rave on about your number 5 now.
Well, for number 5, I'm really stuck, and I think that for me, 3 through 5 are probably my hardest ones because I feel like they can go either way. All 3 of them are, to me, that number 3 tight end. If any of those 3 is there in the 7th or 8th round, I'm going for it. And that's going to be T.J. Hawkinson. For me, T.J. Hawkinson has got a big upgrade, I think, because there's not as many wide receivers there this season. And I think that Goff's going to have a decent year. He likes to check down to the tight end, so I'm going Hawkinson at 5. And at 4, just because of injury concerns and who's going to throw the ball, I'm going to go with George Kittle. Kittle is a monster, but is he going to return to form? Who's throwing the ball? Is it Jimmy G or not? That's why I have him at 4.
Yeah, I've got Hawkinson at 4. For mainly the reasons you said, there is literally no name wide receiver in Detroit. He is going to be the full focus of that offense. I think he is poised to have a great season. And if you miss out on one of the top 3 guys, I think you could probably get Hawkinson under the radar, maybe in the 7th round. His ADP is at 6.06. I think you probably sneak him in at the 7th, maybe even the 8th round over your league mates, just because they're not going to be wanting a piece of the Detroit pie. But I think that pie is going to be very Hawkinson centric. Which brings me to my number 3, and I'm really, really shocked that you would have George Kittle at number 4 and question whether or not he's going to come back strong. This guy came back at the end of the season after the injury and still was ready to perform. He is, to me, the clear-cut number 3 tight end, and he is and I didn't really get into my tiers here, but he is the back end of tier 2 where there's a big drop-off for me from these tier 2 guys to the start of tier 3 where I had Hawkinson, Pitts, and Andrews. Kittle, I think regardless of who's playing at quarterback, whether it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo or if Trey Lance does get the move to it, Kittle is one of those prototype tight ends. He's a go-to guy. He's a security blanket. He's going to be involved regardless unless there's an injury. And that's, I guess, the one thing you can put as an asterisk next to him.
Yeah, so with Kittle, do you take him if he's there in the 3rd round? Do you take him?
I would contemplate that.
Because that's what I have as his average that I'm showing is a 3.
I've got him as the back end as 211 as a 2.11 in the as his ADP. If he's in 3rd round, I'm contemplating it. Yeah, my number 2 guy for sure. If he's in the 3rd round, I'm taking him.
Well, I'm going to go with my number 3, and you know who I've taken, and that's Kyle Pitts. Even better now that Julio's gone. I think they'll use him a lot at the slot, and I could see because of this move that Hunter Hurst gets actually some more can get up there closer to the top 20 to top 25, where he can actually be viable for you week to week, depending on bye weeks and injuries. And that gets to my number 2, which I think our number 1 and number 2 are basically the same. So I'm going to fill in my number 2 is, of course, Darren Waller, and number 1 is Kelsey. For me, we said it in our mock draft, Waller's one of those guys that I don't think he's getting out of the 3rd round in any draft. And it's so weird to think, but I would take a tight end before I take a quarterback any day.
Absolutely. And that's what I was talking about with Patrick Mahomes. I'd rather take Kelsey in the 1st round or early 2nd round than even contemplate taking Mahomes. And same with Waller. I would take Darren Waller late 2nd, early 3rd before even thinking about taking Mahomes, even if Mahomes was on the board. And you and I have the same 2-1 with Waller and Kelsey. And those are 2 players that – so I've got Waller at the top of my tier 2, and I've got Travis Kelsey in tier 1 all by himself, where those 2 players specifically, if you can get your hand on them in those top 3 rounds, and when I say top 3 rounds, yes, I'm including the 1st round, but that's Kelsey back end of the 1st round. If you can get a hold of them there and you still fill in your running backs and wide receivers as needed, and you don't touch a quarterback until later, you've set yourself up at a very distinct positional advantage over your opponent every single week. If you're lining up Travis Kelsey or Darren Waller against, let's even put in one of these alleged tight end ones against Noah Fant each week, you're going to win. As long as you don't have complete chaos that's happened to your roster, and if you didn't draft extremely poorly, you're going to be set up to do very, very well.
Yeah, and just thinking about that with the last pick or the second to last pick, if you get your running back, you get your tight end, you might have to wait a little bit, but with the way the wide receivers are this year, I would be fine with waiting and getting my wide receiver in the 3rd round, my first one, not feel too bad, especially if I can get Waller or Kelsey. Probably more Kelsey than Waller, like you said.
Yeah, that's why I feel like if you're drafting at the 110, anywhere between 110 and 112, you're in a pretty good spot to try that experiment out and take Travis Kelsey. He won't make it to the top of the 2nd round. I doubt that. So you would have to take him at that back end of the 1st round and then get your running backs and then maybe not touch a wide receiver until probably the 4th round. And I would be okay with that personally. I think I would do that coming into my drafts. With Waller, if I could get him late 2nd, early 3rd, mid 3rd, I would be ecstatic. And I would kind of pull the same scenario there where I would take a running back, and then hope that if I had the early 3rd, if I had the 301 to take him there, or 30, probably the 305, I think you can get away with him. I've got his ADP at 312, but I think he's going to go higher than that just because I think players are going to, your league mates are going to see the value in a Darren Waller and nab him up. And hopefully you can outthink them in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, a mandatory position, right, of tight end. There's so many. There's not that many premieres, which we talked about. I do think that Kittle. I probably am downgrading Kittle. I'll probably upgrade Kittle. When we get closer to the year, back up to number 3. But I don't think he'll get higher than 3 for me.
Yeah, and Kittle's another one of those guys I would think about taking late 2nd, early 3rd.
Interesting. Well, we're going to talk more about who we're going to take in the first rounds for the most part, because we're going to go over those running backs, those wide receivers in the next episode. I'm interested in seeing your running backs because I feel like that's the money time.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how we've got our guys slotted and any differences that we have. I'm kind of surprised that on a couple of the players that I statted out for quarterback and tight end that I thought going to show a lot of variance, you were spot on with me. So it's going to be interesting to see if we have those same opinions with running backs and receivers, or if we kind of go off the rails there and have drastically different ideas on those.
Well, I hope so. So it makes it even more entertaining. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like always, guys, make sure to hit us up at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and of course, Google Play. And like always,
Cover 2. Cover 2.